Welcome to another episode of Daily Musings from Sacred Ground. Several decades ago, back in the 1980s, I was talking with some folks who were a little bit older than I am. I was born in 1962, and so I was a little kid during the 60s. But these were folks who kind of came of age in the late 60s and early 70s. And they were also people who continued to hold on to their progressive views into the 1980s, trying to be kind of agents of transformation for our culture. But I was curious about something. I admired them in so many ways, and yet I was interested in how they continued to change. And so I'm sitting here with these folks, and I asked them, tell me something that you believed in the late 60s, the early 70s, when you were a young adult, that you no longer believe. And it was strange to me, because at least this is not a scientific study, but with this small group of people, they were kind of stumped. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, there's something very similar here to maybe somebody who would have what we would call conservative views that had been formed in their youth or young adulthood, and that just had a solidity to them and a lack of malleability. And I guess, to be honest, it troubled me a bit. I think we need to continue to change and grow and develop and including letting go of not everything, but some aspects of what we previously thought. And this kind of fits in well years later when I read the Vietnamese Zen Buddhist Thich Nhat Hanh, because he speaks of learning and growth as being on a ladder. That if we're climbing a ladder, to reach the next rung, we have to let go of the previous one. If we hold on to whatever beliefs, ideas, concepts that we currently have, and we keep a vice grip there, we can't get to the next rung. We can't move on to the next stage or phase. And so I guess my personal aspiration is to have a complexity of views, to have views where someone say, "Oh, you believe that, but then you believe this." Not to just like drop all of the views that you had when you were younger. No, not at all. There's some lovely ideals in there, but to also look at where were the shortcomings, whatever your previous views were. So with that, I oftentimes use the word invite. I invite myself and I invite you as the listener. And maybe this one's an invitation and a challenge. Maybe it's a challenge to me, right? But my invitation today is to think about the views that you held 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And if and I don't like these dichotomies and dualisms, and part of this is an effort to challenge them. But if you see yourself as liberal or progressive, my invitation to you is to say, okay, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, what's a liberal view that I held at that time that I no longer have? My view on that particular thing has grown more conservative, for lack of a better word. And if you consider yourself to be conservative, I invite you into that same process to think of, okay, what's a view that I held 10 or 20 years ago where now I would say on that subject I have a more progressive or a more liberal viewpoint. And if you're middle of the road, then go back 10, 20 years and say, oh, where's some place where I'm less middle of the road? You could even have fun with it and say, hey, where's one place where, gosh, I'm much more or somewhat more conservative on that particular subject, but on this subject, I'm actually more liberal, more progressive. Folks, I'm just inviting us into the complexity of who we really are. We need to break out of our bubbles. We need to break out of the concepts that we put ourselves in. And as Thay invites us, we need to let go of our iron grips on the ladder so we can reach up to another bar and continue to grow, knowing that we'll have to let go of those bars down the road. I'm Michael Malley, and you've been listening to Daily Musings from Sacred Ground.